Now, though, the borrowers of the Belt and Road Initiative money are facing a major problem. These loans and investments were made in US dollars, and they had to be repaid in US dollars. In the United States, bad fiscal and monetary policy have really screwed things up at home, and they've also screwed things up in the international foreign reserves market. This year, 2024, the United States has to roll over, that is refinance, $7.6 trillion in old debt. This is debt, frankly, that should have been refinanced a couple of years ago when rates were very, very low. It was a terrible policy error on the part of Treasury officials. So that's $7.6 trillion in refinancings. We also are going to borrow another $3 trillion just to get through this year. So that is a total of $10 trillion, 10.6, which needs to be borrowed from the world's capital markets. A lot of that money is sitting abroad right now, and it will be going back to the United States to be lent back to the US Treasury at higher rates. By the way, that's going to cause a lot more inflation at home. But now this is a serious problem for foreign countries and foreign companies. Anybody who has to pay a debt back using US dollars, because US dollars now are becoming scarce abroad, but they're becoming very cheap at home. This is all a very weird situation, and it's probably never happened before in the history of the whole world, where you have the world's largest creditor nation, China, who has made over $1 trillion in loans in the currency of the world's biggest debtor nation, the United States. And now, the countries that owe the money are struggling to pay it back. And why are these companies and countries struggling to pay back their US dollar loans? It's not because the mines aren't producing, because they are. It's not because farms aren't growing food, because they are. It's not because the ports aren't loading ships, because the ships are being loaded. It's because all the US dollars are being sucked out of the system to feed the US government's overspending. So where does this leave everyone? China does not want any of the people they loan money to go bankrupt. What they do not want is for a country to sell its mines or sell its ports to raise money to pay the loans back. That would be the worst thing for everybody. So what China is doing is lending their own money this time. They're lending RMB. And these are operating loans. It's to help the borrowers buy them time so they can eventually trade their way out of this problem. This way the mines can keep producing. The raw materials can keep coming. As long as the raw materials come into China today, China can turn them into $2 billion worth of trade surpluses tomorrow. And here is where the Chinese deflation problem can actually perhaps help, because regulators can use transfer pricing techniques to manage the situation even faster. For example, they can agree to pay slightly above market clearing prices to suppliers to help them trade their imbalances a little bit better. I haven't seen any evidence they're actually doing this yet, but at least it's an option for them. The Chinese banking system, the lending and borrowing, is considered a state secret. The data that they do publish has a long time lag, and we can only really understand what's going on here by watching what other people are doing. It's kind of like gravity. We know it's real, and we know it's a powerful force, but we can't see it. We can only observe and measure it by observing and measuring the effects it has on other things. That's what trying to understand Chinese capital markets is like. But there's a lot that we can know by watching what people are doing. For example, we know that Western banks are complaining that the new Chinese loans are considered senior in debt repayment to loans they've made, the loans that are currently outstanding. Observers also complain that the interest rates charged by Chinese banks are much higher than what you can get from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. Chinese rates are typically at 5%, IMF rates are 2%. Obviously, if IMF funds were available at 2%, they wouldn't be borrowing at 5%. And again, we're living in a strange world where a developing country borrowing at 5% to work out distressed debt is still borrowing at about the same rate the U.S. Treasury is. So everything about the situation is upside down and screwy. Inflation is terrible in the United States. The very definition of inflation is too many dollars chasing too few things. And it's about to get a lot worse. And overseas, however, we don't have enough dollars. The U.S. government is spending so much and borrowing so much that they're sucking out all the liquidity from the system around the world. And now nobody can do business outside the U.S. So this is going to require a lot of flexibility from everyone. For China, this has always been house money, and they keep making more. But it's going to require of them a lot of patience and time and forbearance to help everybody else work through these problems too. Thank you. Be good.